Hey traders, welcome to monthly breakdown. We're going to do a breakdown for July and see what's on the cards moving forward. So zooming out on DXY, we see we're still in the C wave, and on the shorter time frames, it looks like we're really just consolidating for more downside. We've got our minimum target set at 93.26, and I suspect we're going to go lower than that, but we're always going to be looking at this area as an interesting area and keep an eye on what plays out. With the US election coming in November, I don't see any dollar strength. Dollar strength is negative for US GDP, which no politician wants right now. They want strong GDP, they want strong numbers, and they really have a lot of debt that they need to take care of, which means a weaker dollar. So at a fundamental level, we're looking for a weaker dollar, and technically we're looking for a weaker dollar as well. So that remains the theme for the dollar at the moment, looking for weakness and looking for opportunities to take advantage of that weakness. And we see the same thing in the Dow Jones dollar. Only difference here is that we have reached our minimum target of 12235. So the more equal weighted dollar pairs are showing that we've reached the minimum target, but given the DXY is still not there, I think going to see some more downside on this pair, on the dollar pairs. Euro USD, same story. If we're looking at the picture, we're looking at this as our correction. This is our A wave, and this is all our choppy B wave, and we're now in our C wave. Our minimum targets are pretty much 120 and 128. So we'll be keeping a close eye to get in on this. Going into the lower time frames, as you see, we've come into this sideways consolidation, something similar to this, I imagine. So we'll be here for the next probably about 2 weeks or so. There's no real clean picture at the moment about what we're looking at here. So we just have to be patient and let the picture emerge for us. It's very possible that all of this is the A wave, and we are now heading into the B wave, and we're in the choppy section of the B wave. It kind of fits with the choppiness of the waves happening. So just have to be patient, wait for a clearer picture to emerge, and we'll be looking for the C wave trade to the downside, and then we're looking for this continuation trade to the upside. So it's all about being patient and seeing what happens to price in this area and trying to figure out a clean B wave picture moving forward. Pound dollar is a little bit of a different story. It looks to me like we may have turned, because like we've said before, we're starting to look at this as an expanding triangle. As you can see by this E wave, we've had our impulse, we've had a correction, and we've had another E wave impulse down. Looks to have completed the pattern, and we've started to head higher. So zooming out quick, as you can see, the higher time frame suggests we're heading towards 131, potentially as high as 141. And taking advantage of this, there's a bit of a position potentially available at the moment if we look at this as a correction. What I don't like about it is the impulsiveness of what's supposed to be a B wave. So what I would like to see out of this before getting in would be this as a first impulse. We'll see some choppy price action to be the center of the B wave. Then that would be your first impulse. See a secondary impulse up, and then something to follow as the C wave. So ideally, that's the picture I'm looking for. We've had quite an impulsive move from the lows. As you can see, it's pretty much a straight line up. So we'd need to see a decent correction, decent sized correction to look to get into it. So I'm looking for a bit of a choppy B wave, and that'll give us a good indication that this isn't a really nice correction for us to get into. because this is a trade you won't want to miss. So this is something we'll be focusing on this week to get entry. It's definitely on the watch list for the week. Aussie dollar, US dollar, similar situation. Not quite sure about the breakdown of this. It looks like what we had was an A wave, and what we're in now is a choppy B wave. Given the price action is such a mess, and rule of thumb, if you don't know what's happening, you're probably in a B wave. So suspecting it's something like this. The picture isn't quite clear yet. This might turn into a expanding triangle B wave, something along those lines. But at the moment, we're just waiting it out. If we see price move up and break this, break the highs, then we'd definitely be looking for a C wave trade to the downside, because there's enough choppiness for that to be a B wave, and we would be waiting for a C wave to follow. Zooming out, if we zoom all the way out, we can see we've got a long way to go in the Aussie dollar. So it's all about just finding a decent entry point, because our minimum target on this is 0.86, 0.865. So we're only not even halfway up to our minimum target on this one. We're keeping a close eye to find a way to take advantage of this. Ideally, we'd want to see a much bigger correction in this. As you can see, we've moved a long way up without a decent correction. And if this is the decent correction, we've got a long way to go. So all that means is if we are going to trade this as a pattern, we would trade this as a C wave, and we would trade this as a continuation, but we would be very wary of a bigger correction to come moving forward, because this isn't a big enough correction for it to be of the same degree of the first impulse. So we're either going to see this draw out a lot longer, take a lot longer, which will be a good thing, because that means we can get into this trade and be trading this impulse. If we're trading this as a smaller degree, you're really only trading this as the impulse, and it's at the end of a much bigger impulse. So basically, you're only really looking at breaking the highs, and you have to be very cautious after breaking the highs of where you're going to end up. So this one's is not great at the moment, but we're hoping for it to get a lot longer, a lot more drawn out, become a more complex correction, and then we can trade the full impulse to the upside. New Zealand dollar, similar situation. What's interesting about this one is that we're very close, if not have touched. We have gone through our minimums, so keeping a close eye on this one. Going into the lower time frames again, we're waiting for a clearer picture. Some form of correction happening within here, but we just don't know what it is just yet. So again, sitting on the sidelines and waiting to see what develops. This is a much nicer impulse. If we're looking at this as a shorter trade to the upside, it may have already finished, but we can't really say. If it has finished, you would say that what we're looking at is a bit of a wave failure. So you would look at this as the first wave down. You've had a B wave, A, B, C correction. It's its own flat pattern. And then you've had this as the completion. It did break these lows, which is always a good sign, and then mean we're heading higher. So if you are looking for a trade on this, this would have been it. So what we will be looking for moving forward is, let's say, a 4-hour correction, something a bit more decent, trading this as the impulse. You'd want to see a correction, and then we can trade this with a entry order above the highs. So again, it just needs patience to get a clearer picture for us. And even if that is the correction, it's of a lower degree. So upside potential is really limited on this one. As you can see, this correction isn't really big enough to be of the same degree. This is where the correction ended. It hasn't reached our minimum time target, so it's of a smaller degree, which means our upside is limited, if that is the case. But we're holding out for this scenario to be more along the lines of a B wave is still in the formation, and we will still get a C wave to the downside. Then we'll make this correction the right degree, and we can trade this to the upside. So again, just being patient with this one, waiting to see how things play out. US dollar CAD, as you can see, we had a nice impulse up, correction impulse. If this is all the correction and this correction is complete, then we're heading lower, but it does mean it's of a lower degree. It's not the kind of size we were looking for. It's just a little bit too small. Again, I'll be hoping for this one to just create some choppiness down to the lows and turn into a bigger ABC correction. If we are heading lower from here, we would just have to wait for a decent correction, something that really looks like, okay, that's a flat pattern and we want to trade that to the downside. We've had a little bit of a chop up. The only time I would consider trading this is if we get something that looks a little bit like this, and then I would take a low risk position somewhere in this area with a stop loss somewhere up here. As you can see, it's been quite an impulsive move down so far. So there is a chance that we are heading lower from here, and all of this was just a correction for more downside. But it's really about being patient and waiting to see what plays out. Higher time frames, as you can see, we still haven't reached our minimum targets of 130 odd. So we're still expecting downside. We're still looking for short trades. I'm just hoping that we get a better correction here to get in to the downside. So I'm going to put this on the watch list for now for this week to see if we get a decent correction to trade to the downside and just keep it low risk. Okay, not my favorite trade. US dollar Swiss, as you can see, this is just continuing to chop lower, which means what we're looking at is this is a correction of some kind. So there'll be a C wave trade coming at some point. It could be from there, it could be a regular flat, could turn into a running flat, which is obviously the ideal picture, but we should get a decent looking trade to the upside as a C wave and then a continuation trade to the downside. Bigger picture, US dollar Swiss is a mess. The only way you can really look at it is this is an A wave and we're now in a long drawn out choppy B wave. And we'll get a C wave to follow. So at the moment, all we're doing is we're waiting for moves down to the lows in the US dollar Swiss. But if we're looking at this as the B wave, we've had an impulse down or very choppy move down, and we've had quite a push higher. And it looks like we're in a choppy move down now. So if we're going to chop lower, breaking these lows is always going to be of interest to us because we are waiting for this kind of move as part of the B wave. And this would be the choppy impulse down. And then we would look for that as another move down. But again, it's a really messy chart. It's definitely not a favorite chart of mine. As you can see, there's also this impulse, which is of interest to us. And we're in the choppy B wave of this impulse. So there's just a lot going on in this chart that needs to be taken into account. And it's just difficult to find an entry. So something you'll be keeping an eye on, and it would have to just wait for something that's really clean, really worth trading. So the trade that we had last week was a good example. It was just set up really nicely to be a trade of that kind. It just didn't play out for us. So it's something, although I took break even on, maybe even took a small loss if you traded it, but it's something we would have taken time and time again because the setup was really good. So in this chart, we're just waiting for those kind of setups. Obviously, we'll be looking for this impulse to trade to the upside at some point. All of this is just a real mess. There must be a triangle in there somewhere, A, B, C, D, E. And we're just waiting. So obviously this area down here is of real interest to us to trade this to the upside. So we're keeping a close eye, but at the moment we don't see much. US dollar yen, still looking for this trade that we spoke about on Thursday. Entry below the lows, stop above the highs. You can even move your stop a bit tighter now, given that this has developed into a bit more of a decent correction. And it's a nice conservative entry point. So this is our first impulse correction, and we're heading lower. And on the higher time frames, as you can see, we are actually trading this impulse to the downside. So, and given they've had a big correction, pretty decent chance we'll get to the full target on this one. Keeping a close eye on this. There's obviously the chance that this is the lows and we're heading higher from here because we have gone past the minimums. But the price action just suggests that there's still some more downside to come. This is why I'm being very risk averse with this trade, keeping the stops wide and just looking at the price action. So we're keeping a close eye on this one as well because there's opportunity to the upside and the downside. So that one is going on our watch list. Bigger picture. It's a real mess. This last few days have been a real mess, but essentially we're looking to be in this impulse to the upside. And it's just a choppier version because as you can see, this is quite a straight up impulse, which means what we're in now is just a correction of this impulse, which is the first impulse of the bigger time frame impulse. This is the way I'm looking at it for now. But because of this choppy mess, there's also the possibility that we're just chopping down to these lows. And all of this is a correction for this impulse. So yeah, really messy chart, but it should clean itself up. And we're just looking for opportunities because when you find an opportunity, it's going to be really nice. It's going to play out really well. It's just about being patient and waiting for those opportunities to present themselves. So obviously, US dollar Swiss and US dollar yen both risk off or risk havens. So they're trading in a very similar manner in terms of a messy chart with good opportunities. So another one we'll be keeping a close eye on. And like we said, for now, there's a pretty good short-term possibility available for us. So definitely, I have got my entry order on this one, and we'll be trading this week. US dollar China, we don't trade this. We just keep an eye on it for kind of geopolitical concerns because anytime the US dollar China rises, it's negative for the US, which means there could be consequences, political consequences, which is strong for the dollar. So as you can see, we're pulling back and we're just keeping an eye on this one to keep chopping higher. So nothing to trade here. We're just keeping an eye on it for kind of macro perspective. Silver's looking good for us. As we said, the bigger time frames, we are looking for this move to the upside. Similar situation to 2008 financial crisis. It's where we're at now. And we want to see silver rally kind of back to those $50 highs. And what that means is we're looking for good entry points And as you can see, we've had a really strong impulse off the lows. And what we're hoping for is that what we're looking at is this correction to play out for us, because this is going to be our entry point to trade this all the way up. Looking at the 8-hour, as you can see, we've had a fairly choppy impulse down, which we're going to consider as our A wave. Then we've had an impulse up, and we've had a running flat. So what we're expecting is another impulse up to match the first impulse. And then we'd want to find an impulse that matches our C wave to the downside. And we're hoping all of this actually drags out to take as long as that. So this could push a little bit higher and be a bit choppier, take a bit longer, and then a nice choppy move to the downside. And then that can give us a really good entry point. We're going to trade this regardless of the size, just because of the way silver is and the upside reward. We'll just have to manage our stop appropriately. So keeping a close eye on silver. I don't think it's going to play out this week. I don't think we're going to trade the C wave just because of the layout of it. There's potentially a decent trade to the downside, so keep an eye on it. But I'm really just looking to get long silver at some point. As you can see, the gold-silver ratio is also just correcting for more downside. So silver is going to outperform gold moving forward. So I'm going to put this on the watch list, but I don't think silver is going to give us any trades this week. Gold, we continue to chop higher. As you can see, just zooming out first, we're looking at an ABC flat pattern. This is our A wave. We're busy in the B wave. It's quite an impulsive B wave, so it's something to take note of and see what's going to happen. But moving forward, we should expect at least a break of the highs in this area at 1912, and then another push lower to finish this ABC correction. At the same time, it's potential that all of this is just correction and we're heading higher from here, given the macro environment. I still suspect that we're going to do this. I'm still leaning towards silver, still as gold moving lower. And in the meantime, we bullish gold. So if we zoom in, it's another bit of a really messy picture. For now, I'm looking at this as an A, B, C, A. So this is your A wave, and this is the A wave of the B wave. Then we've had our B wave, our flat in the middle. We should see something along these lines moving forward. That's basically the picture I'm looking at on gold for now. But there's also a possibility that all of this was actually a really convoluted flat pattern, expanding flat, and we're just chopping higher. Regardless of that, I still think we're heading higher. We're still trading this impulse to the upside. We're just going back to basics and looking for entries to the upside, which it looks like we actually have one now. We've had an impulse correction, impulse up, and we have this flag. So this flag is worth trading, in my opinion, with a stop below the lows. And I would basically let price break these highs and then move the trade to break even pretty much as early as you can. It might be a bit tight. I might need to let it run a little bit more before it moves to break even, but we still kind of, if we're looking at this as an entire impulse, we need to see a bigger correction moving forward. As you can see, this impulse is really pretty much straight up, so we're expecting a choppier one. So gold, we bullish gold, but the tricky part about gold is just finding the right entry. So you can either get in here with a tight stop and just manage your stop appropriately, or get in here with a wider stop and just trust that it's going to keep chopping higher and higher and higher all the way up. But that's the thing, we are expecting choppy price action all the way up to our target of I suspect we're going to go and take on this 2000 level, but we're not quite sure. So yeah, gold, looking for an entry, potential entry lined up for us. I'm going to take this trade as a low risk trade. I'm going to put my stop loss below these lows, and I'm just going to manage it in relation to what price action is doing. It's really difficult trading this. It might be worth just keeping a 1%, keeping a wide stop, and just letting it run. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm just going to kind of play it by ear, play it by the price action, see what happens. But definitely on the watch list. Copper, we continue to push higher. Looks like we've had our running flat and we just continue pushing higher from here. Our minimum target is around about 282, so we're approaching that minimum. But given the precious metals like silver, like gold, still have some more upside, I suspect we're just going to be heading higher on silver towards the full target. The copper is more of an industrial use, so it's going to be more susceptible to economic shocks. If we see some poor numbers out of China, you can see copper take a hit. So keeping a close eye on that. It's not something I really trade. It's just, again, it's one of those macro pictures that's important in the whole global picture. So still bullish copper, still bullish precious metals, still bullish the reflation trade. And I suspect we're going to see this break these highs moving forward. So something to keep an eye on. Palladium, this is our bigger picture. We had this huge run up. We had a huge drop from the lows and then another impulse up, and we've gone into a bit of a choppy move. So I suspect what we're looking at is this is your initial impulse down, and this is your A. We're obviously in a choppy B wave, and we should see a C wave. So expect to chop all the way down to these lows, then turn this into a flat, turn this into continuation to the downside as part of this impulse. And then we're obviously looking for this trade to the upside. So there's some really nice looking trades on Palladium. I would wait for these lows to be broken. I would probably only trade this to the downside, although there will definitely be a really nice looking trade. To trade this impulse. So if you can get long in this area, if it looks like a clean entry, then I'll definitely take it. But it looks like we're just going to continue chopping lower on this one. I suspect this is the center point. And I don't think this is going to play out this week. So I'm going to keep this off the watch list. It's not a big trade for me, but just keeping note of all the metals at the moment. Platinum remains a complete mess. We've had this impulse up. It's hard to say exactly where this impulse completes. Is it here? Is all of this part of this correction? But it doesn't look like it to me. This looks like more of a B wave, but there's no A wave to match it. So there's probably a choppy A wave in here somewhere, and we're now entering the B wave. So waiting for this to clean up, waiting for a more impulsive wave. It gives us a good indication. What I would like to see is just a chop to the highs. Which would give us an indication that all of this was the A wave, and there's actually a complex A wave, an A, B, C. Then we're in the B wave now, and then I'd like to see a very impulsive C wave to the downside. And then all of this would be our flat pattern for continuation to the upside. Longer term, I remain bullish platinum. It's one of my favorite charts at the moment. As you can see, we've had an impulse up. We've had this long choppy move down, which is our B wave, and we're looking for this impulse up. And then obviously we'll be looking for this impulse down as well. So looking to get long platinum, we are a long way from our minimum targets on this one, and just looking for an entry. So again, one of those charts, you need to be patient, wait for the price action to come to you, and then get in on that. So suspecting this is just a really messy ABC, and the impulsiveness of the C wave will confirm it for us, because as you can see, this is a really long, drawn out, choppy A wave. So if we can see a choppy C wave, a very impulsive C wave, it's a good indication that that's the C wave, and we're heading higher after that. So keeping this off the watch list, obviously nothing to see yet, remaining patient for platinum. Euro Oz, also a mess, but is potentially a trade as we speak. Starting at the higher time frames, as you can see, what we are looking for is this trade to the downside. We've had this move down, and we are now trading this move to the downside as a big ABC. Lower time frames, we've had a really nice push lower as an impulse, and we've had a perfect correction given the length of time it's taken and the fact that it is very high momentum. It's very much a running correction. The only messy part about this is the choppiness we've seen already. If this is our first impulse to the downside, correction, impulse, it's been difficult to get in. And I suspect we've now seen an end, and we're now looking for a short trade to the downside. Now it's all about taking a look. Is this a running flat for more downside? So ideally, we want to see this chop all the way up, and then we can trade it to the downside. Conservatively speaking, an entry order below the lows would work just fine. Stop above the highs, and your minimum downside target is obviously a very attractive one. And just so you know, this is a real candle. If we go into the lower time frames, you'll see it is not a flash crash or anything like that. There is liquidity in it. It happened during crazy times. So just zooming out to find our minimum targets. As you can see, this is why we think this is such an attractive trade, because our minimum target is 1.46. So if we can get in, there's at least 10 to 1 just going to the minimum target. Obviously, we've had a very impulsive first wave to the downside, so it might be choppy, and is exactly what we're seeing. But if you can get a good entry with a fairly wide stop, then you should be in to hold on to for the long run. So this is very much a trade of interest for us this week. It's just trying to find a decent entry might be challenging, similar to gold. Euro CAD, just so we go to the bigger picture, I can show you what we're trading is this. We're looking for the corresponding wave of this impulse. And we're looking at this as a decent A, B, C. Nice running flat, but messy, but all the waves work for it to be that. And we're obviously in a bit of a choppy mess now. So zooming out, we've had a really strong impulse up, and we're now in a long, choppy, drawn out correction. And there's nothing really clean about this. There's nothing really clear. So we're waiting. Obviously, the rule is, because we don't know where we are, we're suspecting we're in a B wave. So I suspect what we're looking at is this is an A wave. You can even call that the A wave with a wave failure at the end, because there is a impulse, correction, impulse running flat in the middle. If you take a closer look at this. So this is all a choppy B wave and a C wave. So longer term, I like this for a trade to the upside, but shorter term, there's really nothing for us. It's a real mess. We're just waiting for something to emerge. Euro Swiss, another one, longer term, such a messy chart. It's really hard to see exactly what's happening. So we try to look for some shorter term trades. And what we do know is we have broken higher with a really strong impulse. So this is either the start of a move up or a really strong A wave. And then we've had a really quite impulsive move down. So this is why we're focusing on this in the short term. We've had this impulse, and this looks fairly corrective to me. If you take a look at these waves, you can call this A of B. You can see you've got a decent looking flat in the middle, and you can call this C of B. So what we're expecting is a choppy move up to make this running flat. And if we get that trade, you would want to trade this to the downside because it's a nice trade. And then if we get that, because ideally you want to break these lows, and if we do break these lows, it's really nice because that's an A, that's a B, and then we can trade this C wave to the upside. So taking a look, keeping an eye on this to push higher, and then you could trade this to the downside and then reverse it to the upside. So longer term, complete mess, hard to exactly say what's going on here. As you can see, there's no real clean waves. There's obviously, this is a correction of some kind, but given the deep peg that's happened here, it's really hard to say exactly what kind of wave structure we're in, which is a good sign. We're in a B wave, and this is just a long, drawn-out flat pattern. So we're just keeping a shorter term bias on the Euro Swiss and trading it in the shorter term. I'm going to put it on the watch list because the price action is nice. Impulse, choppy corrective price action that is of high momentum nature. So good chance you're going to get an impulse to the downside. This could all be just a corrective triangle, which is a running triangle, which is really hard to trade, and a good chance we'll miss it and we'll just wait for this to trade to the upside if that is the case. Euro pound. Longer term, we've had this impulse up, we've had this correction, and we've had this impulse up. So now it's all about looking exactly at what's happening here. We've had this impulse down, and we're in a choppy wave up. So we're kind of seeing, are we chopping up to the highs for this to become a flat pattern of its own for continuation for more upside? Or we're looking to see if this is the initial impulse and we're in an A wave, and all of this is actually just a correction for more downside. So we should see choppy move down, a push higher, and then that would indicate more downside in the pound, in the euro pound. So it's at a bit of a crux at the moment. We're waiting to see where we're at, what's happening, what the picture is, and we sit on the sidelines now in the euro pound. Ideally, for me, would be scenario number one, and we're just chopping higher back up to the highs. That would be the ideal scenario for me, but again, it's too early to say. It's just wait and see at the moment. If you want to get tricky on this, we'll get a bit more risk, get a bit more risky. There's potential trade to the upside. If this is your first impulse up, A of B, this is a flat pattern, C of B to follow. Could be that, but nothing in for me. I don't like it. I'd rather just sit on the sidelines and wait to see exactly what we're looking at. Euro yen, similar to Euro Swiss, although it is a bit of a clearer picture on this one. So bigger time frame, we're looking at all of this is a correction, an ABC correction, and we're in the B wave at the moment. So we're in the choppy corrective price action down to the lows. But at the same time, this choppy corrective price action has decent structure in it. As you can see, we've had this impulse up, We've had choppy corrective price action down, and we're looking for another impulse up. We've broken this trend line, which is interesting, and we've tested it. So it's kind of a classic chart pattern. But like we said, it's all about waiting game now to see which of these is an A wave and which of them is an impulse. So for now, we're looking at this as the initial impulse, and we're trading this as the correction, meaning we're waiting to see if this chops all the way up to the highs. And then there's a definite trade for us as a C wave down and then a continuation to the upside. That'll be the perfect scenario for me, because our upside target on that is quite high on this one, because we're trading this as the first impulse. So we're trading a C wave of an ABC that is quite a high degree C wave. It's a weekly C wave. So a really good opportunity. So again, it's all about just patience. Obviously, there's another scenario where we haven't seen the end of the B wave and we're just going to continue pushing down towards the lows. So we need to wait for clean entries. We need to wait for right opportunities. And it looks like we're starting to get that, but it's too early to say. If this plays out, then it's definitely something you want to trade. You can trade both short and long, given the time frame of this price action. So keeping it off the watch list for the week because it's too early. We need a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks for this to play out. But longer term, we're looking for this as a trade for sure. Euro New Zealand, higher time frames, similar to Oz New Zealand. We're looking for this move to the downside. Looking at minimum targets, we're a lot closer to the minimum targets on this one. We just hit them, but the picture remains bearish for the euro. As you can see, there's a potential opportunity at the moment. We're calling this the impulse. We're calling this an expanding triangle correction, and we're just in a choppier version of this impulse. And what we're getting, what it looks like we're getting, is an ABC correction. I would ignore the long just because of the way price is moving. It's quite high risk to get into the long. And as you can see, it's going to be a choppy wave up. I'm also ignoring the long because it's a potential that we've already had the completion of this pattern. And it was just a contracting flat. So I want to see confirmation of this wave to the upside before getting short to the downside. If it doesn't happen, it means we've missed the boat and we're just going to let it run without us because there's no clean entry. Unless you want to get really risky, get onto the lower time frames and trade this as a correction. I wouldn't do that myself. I don't like it. I want to see the bigger picture time frame play out first and confirm to me that what we are in is just a correction for more downside. Obviously, you've got a fairly decent targets on this if it does pop higher. And you could probably look at 165 as a target. So we've reached the minimum, so it's a difficult scenario for us. Where are we heading? If we see this running flat, we know confirmation we're heading lower and we can trade that to the downside. So again, nothing on the cards this week, I imagine. I'll take another look at this on Thursday, but it's kind of just wait and see for us for now. If you see a decent entry to the long side on the hourly, then it could be worth taking. But again, I'm going to be patient on this one and just allow things to play out. And if they do, then I know exactly what the picture is. We're in a bit of uncertainty on this chart at the moment, so I would be patient with it. Pound Oz. Obviously, we've had this impulse. We've had choppy corrective price action, and we're trading this impulse to the downside. Unfortunately, there just hasn't been any entries for us. There was one up at the highs here, but this chart is just running. We've come a long way without any decent correction. So as much as I hate to let it slide, I'm just going to sit by and watch this one run until we get a decent sized correction to get in and trade short. Targets are really wide on this, so there's definitely some downside to be played on this. Given that this is quite a brisk move down, I'm hoping we start to see some choppiness that we can look to get into. But that being said, still nothing. So it's very early days. This is a kind of chart where you just watch run, unless you want to trade really kind of intraday trading, waiting for opportunities to get short, just keeping your stops tight and trading this to the downside on the hourly. Not my favorite. I think that's high risk reward trading, or high risk trading really. And I would want to see something cleaner on the higher time frames. Pound CAD, also a nice looking chart. Again, just waiting for things to play out. We've had this impulse down, we've had this impulse up, and we have long choppy corrective price action. So we are looking for an entry to the upside. Ideally, we want to see these lows broken before we get into the upside trade. So it's another one we're just kind of waiting to see how things play out. There's no real clean price action worth trading, in my opinion. Given that pound dollar is looking strong, its potential we've turned already. And this is the first move up. This was a wave failure. Another scenario is that this is just a running flat for more downside, or not a running flat, just a regular flat for more downside. So again, no clean pictures, nothing worth trading in my opinion. If you want to trade it, you can trade this as the first impulse. This is corrective. This is the start of the next impulse, and you have a bit of a flag pattern here to trade to the downside. So if you want to get risky, trade it to the short side, go ahead, but keep your stops tight, because I don't like it we're in a B wave, which is always difficult to trade. I would much rather wait for things to get clearer and hopefully get this trade to the upside. Pound Swiss, I'm long pound Swiss. Going back to the weekly chart, as you can see, we've had this impulse down and we're in this ABC correction. This is a long drawn out A wave, so we should see a nice push off these lows now of this correction. We've broken the lows, we've pushed higher, impulse up. We can call this a flat, or we can call this an expanding triangle as well, very similar to the pound dollar. Doesn't really matter. The picture all points to more upside. We've had an impulse up off the lows, and looking at correction at the moment, this looks very corrective to me. So entry order above the high is definitely going to work in your favor. Potentially this is a bit of a zigzag. This is your A wave. There's a bit of an expanding triangle somewhere in here. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. And we're now impulsing down. This could all be the A wave of a bigger correction, or it could be a zigzag, and it's just going to draw out. It's pushing quite strongly down, but I don't see how this is a scenario for more downside on the pound Swiss. Obviously, I could be wrong, and we're pushing lower, and this was just another correction of this C wave. If that is the case, I'll take my loss, so be it. I still see this as a really good trade to the upside. So it's a really good opportunity to put your entry order above the highs, see where the lows are, nice wide stop, low risk, and just let it run from there if it does take off. So definitely one for the watch list, and definitely one you want to have on the top of your watch list. Pound yen. Again, like we said, this is the only thing wrong with our pound Swiss trade is the current price action of pound yen. So as we can see, pound yen's got that same scenario where we have the A wave, choppy corrective B wave, we've broken the lows and we've pushed higher. So expecting to be in the C wave. The only problem with this is the makeup of this wave so far looks very much like an impulse, a correction, which I'm just going to put it as an arrow for now, and an impulse up. And now we're just pushing lower. So it's a bit of a worry, because if we want to call this the correction, this is a very impulsive B wave. So it's a bit of a worry given the price action of the pound yen compared to the pound Swiss, although this little move in here is enough to be the choppiness of the wave. So keeping a close eye, and that's why my conviction on the pound Swiss is a little bit diminished because of the pound yen. But as you can see, the bigger picture just very clearly says bullishness in the pound. So maybe we just haven't finished the correction. Maybe this is going to be its own expanding triangle, or maybe it's a triangle itself. A, B, maybe we see something along these lines, A, B, C, D, E, and all of this becomes a triangle for more upside. So a couple of scenarios that could play out that will match the impulsiveness of the waves, but we're just going to have to wait and see how things work out for us. Pound New Zealand. I'm going to put pound yen on the watch list just because it is of interest. Pound New Zealand, very similar to pound Oz. As you can see, we've had this impulse. We've had choppy corrective price action, and it looks like we are taking off to the downside. A different scenario is this is just a part of the B wave. We've had the impulse up, and we're going to get that moving forward. So again, it's all about waiting patiently to see how things play out. Given that pound Oz looks so bearish, then it's a good indication we're heading lower. But at the same time, all of this could just be an expanding triangle for this to be the scenario on the pound Oz. And this would have to push higher. So yeah, keeping a close eye, seeing what we're getting, looking for those entries, but in the meantime, nothing really of interest to us. If we see a fairly strong impulse up, and then a correction over the next few weeks or months, then that's a really good sign for us to get long. There'll be some really nice trading in that. Given that the pound is looking really strong, I suspect this is actually the scenario. But emerging markets also looking really strong, so it's really hard to say which is which on this one. So again, we're just keeping an eye on it, seeing what emerges from it, and just being patient to see what comes. Aussie dollar CAD, we've had a really strong impulse off the lows. It's just been basically a straight line up, so we really need to see something of a correction before we look to get long on this one. Longer time frames, terrible chart. I really don't like trading this pair. There's so much choppiness in it. It's really not worth getting into anything unless you get really clean entries. So I kind of stay away from Aussie CAD unless I get something really clean. Aussie yen, longer time frame, we are looking for a very nice trade to the upside. As you can see, this is quite a choppy wave, so it could be very much a risk on impulse to the upside. And it's all about finding a long entry on the dollar, on the Aussie dollar yen. As you can see, if we're going to call this one impulse, we need this correction to be drawn out. This is our minimum correction timeline. We've had a move down. Hopefully we get some choppiness to the upside, turn it into a high momentum correction, and then get this as a C wave for a nice running flat. That would be our ideal scenario, and then we can look to get long in this area. We can also look to get short in this area and trade it both ways. So another one that we're just going to have to sit and wait, sit on our hands, wait for the right entry. I really like this chart, but it's just too early to do anything about it, really. So keeping it off the watch list, but keeping a close eye on it because this is a really good opportunity. Aussie Swiss, pretty much the same picture. As you can see, the wider scenario is a bit of a mess, but I'm looking for that as a trade. Calling this because this is quite impulsive. It's an impulse down. And although this is very impulsive, it's quite choppy. It's a choppy impulse up, which I consider to be an A wave. We have this long drawn out B wave. And now we've had an impulse off the lows. So I suspect it's the same as the Aussie yen. Prefer the Aussie yen over the Aussie Swiss, but this is a good indicator to see, give us confirmation of Aussie yen. Aus New Zealand, again, this is another one that's just really, we're not quite sure exactly where we sit because we have hit the minimum and we're waiting for price action to confirm which direction we're headed. We just barely got to the minimums. So suspect we're still heading higher, but we need price action to confirm it on the lower time frames. What we're getting at the moment is nothing of that kind, really. We're getting quite, we've had a strong impulse down. We've had enough to call this a correction, and we've had a push down. So it's potential we're just going to continue to the downside, but at the same time, it's potential that this is just an ABC, this is your A wave, and we're just in some choppy corrective price action, and we're going to stay here for a little while. So if we get this, we know what to expect moving forward, something along those lines wherever the B wave ends, and then continuation to the upside. So Aus New Zealand, sitting on our hands on this one as well, waiting for a clearer picture to emerge. New Zealand dollar yen, higher time frame, similar situation. We've hit our minimums. We've hit way beyond our minimums because we've gone all the way up to 786. But price action is looking corrective for more upside. So we could push higher on this one. For now, looking at this as a flat pattern. Want this to get a bit more choppy, give us our C wave, and then trade its continuation to the upside. Nothing in it for now. Still in the B wave, shorter term B wave, waiting for a cleaner picture. Swiss yen, this has been a real mess, continues to be a mess. And all I really know is we've had an impulse down and we're in a long drawn out correction. My suspicion is that this is an A wave, we're in a B wave, and a C wave will follow at some point. So there's really no clean picture. Potentially we were already in the C wave, and all of this was the B wave. The B wave finished in this area, and we're heading higher as a C wave. I don't like any of these scenarios, so this is another one where you just want to sit and wait to see how it plays out. I still like this as a picture, where all of this is just a flat pattern within the B wave, and we still need to see a push lower at some point. So my bias is for the short side, but again, unless I see really clean price action, I'm not going to trade it. I took a loss on this already, so I'm being very conservative in terms of waiting for a right entry. Oil looking really good, looking like we are having a nice drawn out correction. This is obviously the kind of length of the correction we're looking for. And we are getting some choppy price action. I would like this to just become more choppy and eventually see a nice C wave from somewhere there. So this is a nice running flat, nice complex running flat, and just develops into something really nice to trade. At the moment, is potentially we're looking at this as an impulse. There's a bit of a flat pattern within it. So this would be a lower degree A wave. You can see a lower degree C wave, see another push higher as part of this impulse, a choppier move, a choppier push higher, then another push lower, and then that would be our complex pattern. So ideally, that's what we're looking for, because that's when we want to get long on oil. I still suspect oil is heading much higher. Higher time frames suggest that we just finished the end of a long correction, and we're just pushing back up to kind of $140 oil moving forward. So I remain bullish oil, waiting for a good entry. Same picture on UK oil, just waiting for this correction to play out and give us something to trade. S&P, higher time frame, as we said, we finished this expanding triangle. We've had the initial impulse up. We're kind of driving blind in terms of what the upside target is. So it's short-term trading on the S&P. Going into the short term, there is some really good opportunities available to us here. As you can see, what's happened is we've had this impulse down, we've had an impulse up, we've had choppy corrective price action. So I imagine this is its own ABCB wave. Would be amazing if we broke these highs, because that gives us the conviction that we're going to be heading higher once the correction completes. And we're looking to trade both to the downside and continuation to the upside. So basically on the lower time frames, we're looking for a turn and we're looking to get short. Another way to trade this is a great place to trade options, trades kind of 3,000 to 2,900 puts and load up on the puts, take those off in this area and then load up on the calls, because we know we're heading higher. So trading options on this is a really good low risk way to play it for those of you that do trade options. NDX, driving completely blind on NDX. As you can see, we had this running flat, lower degree running flat. We've had a push higher, and now it's all about where do we go next. As you can see, we still haven't had a correction for this impulse. So all of this is one impulse of 1 degree. And we need a bigger correction if we are heading lower. The other option is that this is the final impulse and we are actually just going to be heading lower from here as a bigger correction, a much bigger correction. Tech really overbought, really kind of in bubble territory at the moment. So just got to be cautious on this one. I would be out of tech completely. There's a couple of US equities that look worth a short, but I would stay out of tech if I was you. US 2000, similar picture to the S&P, just pushing higher, waiting for this correction to finish. then we can trade this to the downside and then trade continuation to the upside. Definitely the short you want to get in, because similar with S&P, there's nothing to say that this is the first impulse. This is the entire correction. It's actually more of a zigzag, and we're just heading lower from here. So it's definitely a short you want to be in. And that's why I like the options as a way to trade it. The DAX, as you can see, we've pushed higher. I don't really see a scenario, given the higher time frames, where we break the highs on this impulse up. Because as you can see, this is an impulse up. This is a complete running flat correction, and then we've had this impulse up to complete it. And then we had an impulse down, and now we've had an impulse up. So the only way this impulse up can really fit the structure is if we're in an A wave. And if we're in an A wave, it means we can't break these highs. So I suspect at some point we're going to start chopping down as part of the B wave. But it's really interesting to see how high this impulse has gotten already. So interesting picture. If it doesn't work out that way, I'd have to relook at it. Potentially what we're looking at is an expanding triangle. And now we're impulsing to the upside. That kind of matches the picture. But yeah, the DAX, I would stay out of the DAX. I don't like the DAX. I don't like the price structure. There's nothing clear about it. I would stay away from it. Similar picture with the euro. Again, I'm suspecting that this is all an A wave and we need to start chopping lower eventually. But we continue to push higher. So similar situation, that maybe this is all just an expanding triangle. I don't really like this price action as an expanding triangle. So yeah, again, staying out of most equities just don't look good. Or just trading the S&P on the short term. If I was going to trade equities, I would be long the Aussie. As you can see, we've had an A, we've had a choppy B up, and we had a C wave down that reached minimum target levels. Almost touched the 0.786. So this is the only equities I would look to get long. But at the same time, there's nothing to say that this wave is complete. This could all just be correction for more downside in Aussie equities. So although it is the best of the bunch, it's not a really nice looking bunch. But shorter term, we do have a really nice looking flat pattern forming here. If you get our C wave to the downside, it's a nice ABC, it's of a decent size, and we can trade this continuation to the upside. I think I forgot to put the S&P on our watch list. China equities, as you can see, just taking off to the upside. I suspect this is all part of this impulse, which is all part of a B wave of this correction. So yeah, keeping an eye on it. There's potential that all of this was a wave to the downside. It is now complete, and this is the first move up. China equities, not a huge fan, but price action does look pretty decent. So just keeping an eye on to see if this is all corrective or this is the start of the move up, and all of this was the first correction. EEM, kind of bullish EEM, emerging market equities, which gives us a bullish case for China. So worth keeping an eye on. It's potentially a triangle ABCDE that just completed, and we're pushing higher from here, which matches the point that China has bottomed and we're heading higher, which means risk on, which matches our Aussie dollar yen trade to the upside. So it's a really interesting picture playing out where it does look like we're heading risk on, which is part of the reflation trade I spoke about. So keeping a close eye on that. South African equities, really messy picture, but pushing higher. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Pounds are higher time frame. I really like the ZAR at the moment. I think there's a bullish case for the ZAR. As you can see, we're looking at the pound ZAR. We've still got a long way to go for downside targets. Conservatively speaking, are kind of 18 Rand, potentially getting down to 15 Rand all the way. Shorter term, as you can see, we've had an impulse from the highs and we've had a decent looking correction, but potential that this is all just a higher degree correction that is still in play. This is potentially the A wave. So kind of waiting to see what plays out of this. But again, bias is to the short side. So just looking for those short entries. Euros are similar situation, higher time frames, as you can see, ABC flat pattern, looking for downside to trade the C wave, and minimum target 1745, still a ways to go. And we've had a bit of a correction, but potential this is going to be like an expanding triangle that eventually plays out. So just keeping an eye on it, waiting for something worth getting short on. US dollar ZAR, same situation. As you can see, higher time frames, ABC correction. We haven't reached our minimums yet, and we've just gone into this lower time frame correction, which matches the ZAR, matches the dollar correction. So looking for this to just chop sideways down to kind of 1628, push higher as our C wave, and then definitely want to get short this to the downside. Full target is around about 1380, I think. So really nice trade. Singapore dollar also just correcting, looks like more downside to come. I think we're just in a sideways chop correcting for more downside. So although there is a lot of trade opportunity, as you can see, higher time frame, we still have some ways to go to our full target. I think we've got pretty close to our minimum target, but the corrective price action suggests we're heading lower. Same with the Mexican, suspecting all of this is just corrective. Nothing we can really do at the moment. We're waiting for it to play out. But the bigger picture, same story, ABC to the downside. Same with the Brazilian real, ABC to the downside. I don't like this one at all. Brazilian real, the economy is really weak in Brazil, but for now we can look at it like this. Not my favorite trade. I would stay out of this one. I would stay out of Turkey as well, although the chart is much cleaner and we're getting a pretty decent correction for more downside. A lot of government manipulation in this one. So again, it's not one of my favorites. This is just to show you that the US dollar is, the US dollar is looking weak because it is just correcting for more downside moving forward. So this is the Russian ruble, higher time frame, similar story, ABC correction, but too early to say where we are in the lower time frames. Bitcoin. So I'm going to remove all the drawings on Bitcoin and show you that what we are looking at is potentially just a longer, more complex correction with this portion of it in the B wave. I'm going to show you that in Ethereum. So looking at Ethereum, removing all the drawings in Ethereum, what you can see is we've had this push lower. We then had this push higher. And we've had this kind of flat pattern looking maneuver, which could be all of the B wave, which means a choppier version of this, maybe not as high, up to there, and something like that, just to make a long, drawn out running flat. As you can see, we've had a pretty strong, decent impulse from the upside, from the downside, sorry. So you want a nice long drawn out correction, which we're getting in Ethereum. Now going back to Bitcoin, you'll see a similar situation where we've had this impulse down. We can consider this just a very choppy wave up. And now we've gone into this kind of long drawn out price structure, what we initially thought was a C wave, but it's just been too long and too not impulsive enough to be a complete C wave. So I'm suspecting it's something along these lines, but there's nothing clear about it. So kind of sitting on my hands for Bitcoin, but I suspect moving forward, we're going to see, similar to Ethereum, a push higher, a push lower, and all of this becomes a running flat of this impulse, which matches the timing of this one. So it'll be a really nice correction. Basically, in short, this is supposed to be a C wave, but looks nothing like a C wave. It is just long, drawn out, choppy price action, which makes us think, okay, what we're looking at is a B wave. So I'm just going to put in my general correction symbol and wait to see what plays out from this. If this continues to chop lower, definitely would want to buy this at around 8,000, 8,400, somewhere there, to trade it to the upside, because now we have two C waves to come, and you could trade both the C waves and then trade this to the upside. So too early to tell, keeping it on the watch list, but nothing worth trading at the moment, just waiting for a cleaner picture to emerge. Similar with Ethereum, I'm going to keep this on the watch list. There's a potential long that's playing out as we speak, where this is actually the correction and we pushed higher. So if you get a lower degree kind of flag or something along those lines, you can trade it to the upside. For me, I'm just going to stay on the sidelines, waiting to see if this wave comes to fruition and we get our C wave to the downside. XRP, similar situation, just a real mess, no real clarity. Waiting for a cleaner picture to emerge. XRP, Bitcoin, we're still waiting for this push higher, unless all of this is a triangle or contracting flat. So nothing really there. Bitcoin gold is a good indication for gold, for Bitcoin. I remain bullish on this long term. As you can see, very clean price action for a push higher. So we really like this to play out, but need some time first for Bitcoin to get clean on what it wants to do and then start to outperform gold. Cool, that's it. That's all the charts. Bit of a shorter watch list again. It's just the kind of week where we're just waiting for opportunity, waiting for something really clean to trade. US dollar yen obviously is on the cards. Like we said, starting to push lower. Definitely entry order below the lows. Pound Swiss and pound US dollar, definitely worth looking at if it plays out in our favor. And that's really the watch list. S&P is obviously one to watch. We're pushing higher and we want to see where this wave ends. We've already hit our targets for for this wave. We're busy pressing up against the 786. I'm hoping we go and break the highs to make it a running flat, to give us conviction for more upside moving forward. But we have to wait and see how it plays out. That's why I like options. Just trade some kind of 3,000 puts on this one. So cool, guys. That's it for the month. Early part of the month, I see us having to be patient, but coming in towards the end of the month, definitely some big opportunities coming our way. So we'll be keeping a close eye on a lot of charts. I'll see you on Thursday for the market update, the shorter term market update, and I'll see you in the US session later, where we're going to run through US equities and what US equities opportunities are available. It's going to be a new segment that I'm putting in. Every month I'm going to run through the best US equity opportunities. So cool, guys. Enjoy your Monday. Have a good week and see you soon.